All right, let's look at how to solve a couple of these quadratics from the sheet we got in class. We're going to do letter M to start. So that one read 3x squared minus 50 equals negative 5x. So again, to use the quadratic formula, we have to be equal to 0. So I want to get this minus 5x out of there. So I'm going to add 5x and add 5x to both sides, which means the right side is now 0. That 5x isn't going to get combined with anything because I have an x squared term and a number. So it's going to go just in the quadratic, and I want to make sure it goes in the middle because that's where the x value is. So our problem now reads 3x squared plus 5x minus 50 equals 0. So from that, we'll be able to say that our a value is the 3, our b value is positive 5, and our c value is negative 50. Now, to do the quadratic, we're first going to do that negative b over 2a, or the opposite of b over 2a. So we've got a negative, and then my b value is 5, and 2 times a, which is 3, which equals negative 5 over 6. Now that's a decimal, obviously, but we're going to leave it as that and just hold on that for a second. I've got my first part. Now, let's shift gears and do the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So we're going to start subbing in again. Notice that the square root is just the top, so I'm going to go b squared, that's 5 squared minus 4 times my a value of 3 times my c value of negative 50. And that's all over 2 times the a value of 3. So let's start to simplify those piece by piece. Again, I don't like to do too much at once here, so I'm going to start by just doing this 5 squared, which is 25. Again, remember, squaring a number, that's always going to be positive, even if that was a negative. Now, the next piece is these 3 numbers multiplied together. So I'm going to take negative 4 times 3 times negative 50. Now, I see a negative times a negative, so I know I'm going to have a positive here. Now I'm going to take 4 times 3 times 50, and that's 600. And that's all over 2 times 3, which is 6. I'm going to keep going here and do what's 25 plus 600, which is 625, all over 6. Now I'm going to try to square root 625, and it is the square root of 625 equals 25, so I'm going to have 25 over 6. Now that's part 2 of my answer. So what I have is negative 5 over 6 plus or minus 25 over 6. Now notice that the denominators are the same, and the denominators are always going to be the same. So what we really can do here is do negative 5 plus or minus 25 over 6. And what we're going to do with that then is break that off into 2 separate problems. I'm going to do negative 5 plus 25 over 6, and I'm going to do negative 5 minus 25 over 6. Negative 5 plus 25 is 20 over 6, and negative 5 minus 25 is negative 30 over 6. Oops. Negative 30 over 6 gets me to negative 5, so that's one solution. 20 over 6 would simplify to 10 over 3, or 3 1/3, or 3.3 3, 3 repeating. So those become my two answers, 3 1/3 or 3 and 0.333 and -5. Now let's look at another problem. Let's do the one right above it, L. So L reads 7x squared minus 47 equals x squared minus 6x minus 11. Again, I want to get all of this to one side. So I've got the problem equal to 0. Guess it makes sense to just move these two parts over. So I'm going to move the x squared over and add the 47. Because again, the a value doesn't really matter. So the a value is going to be -6, but that's okay. So we'll just keep filling in those numbers. And now, because we've canceled that out and canceled that out, we have 0. So my a value is -6, my b value is also -6, and my c value is 36. So again, let's first start with our -b over 2a piece. It's going to be negative. My b value is -6 over 2 times an a value of also -6. So again, I'm going to start by simplifying that parenthesis piece first. So I've got this negative sign out in front. I've got -6 over -12, which becomes 6 over 12, because a negative on top of a negative. So this is -6 over 12, because again, I've got a negative out in front. So the fraction itself is -6 over 12, or -1/2. Now we'll do part 2, which is the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So let's sub in our values. Our b value is -6. Our a value is -6. And our c value was 36. And that's all on top of 2 times a, which is -6. All right, so we start with squaring -6, which will be 36. Again, a negative number squared is always positive. Now we're going to, again, multiply those three numbers together. I see it's a negative times a negative times a positive. So negative times negative is going to be positive. And 4 times 6 times 36 is 864. And that's all on top of -12. 36 plus 864 is 900 on top of -12. The square root of 900 is 30. So this is 30 over -12. So again, remember earlier we simplified that fraction. We're going to see right now that we don't need to, because as I scroll back to this, that earlier section right here is going to have the same denominator as I have down here. So I'm going to go back to the -6 over 12, and we're plus or minus part 2, which was 30 over -12. Now, I have my negative sign on the top here. I'm going to switch that to the bottom, which again is irrelevant where that sign is, which allows us to do 6 plus or minus 30 over -12. Again, we're going to branch that off into two different parts. I'm going to go 6 plus 30 over 12 and 6 minus 30 over 12. 6 plus 30 is 36 over 12, or 3. 6 minus 30 is -24 over sorry, let me back up here because those were over negative 12s. So 36 over negative 12 is negative 3. Negative 24 over negative 12 would be positive 2. So we would have our two answers, negative 3 and positive 2. So a couple examples, hope those help work through the quadratic formula into of our more complicated types of problems.